Prepare yourself for the Warning Woods 2024 Halloween special, The House Across the Water. This is only one chapter from a 5-part story, so be sure to listen to each part in order. A new chapter will be released each day until the story reaches its harrowing conclusion at the dawn of Halloween. Be ready. Without further ado, let's return to Lorna Shallows and the house across the water. I visited the evil house one morning with my friend. We thought it was abandoned, but a man was there instead. He showed me every room inside. He opened every door. But his friendliness was a disguise. His smile was a lure. I woke before my family the next morning and went out on the dock to watch the sunrise with a dry bowl of Fruit Loops. Sunlight bounced off of the water, forcing me to squint, but the rest of my senses saw for me. My skin absorbed the growing warmth of the sun, balanced pleasantly by a cool breeze coming off of the water. My nose detected the soil-rich scent of the shore, tinged with a sour green smell from the algae under the dock. Behind this scent wafted the lingering smell of pine. I tasted an invigorating freshness on the morning breeze, which, in part, shifted my general attitude toward the house across the lake. In those quiet, early hours, the memory of my anxiety seemed silly and childish. With nothing better to do, I decided I might go check the place out. From a distance, of course. I wondered if maybe the front of the house looked more welcoming. Maybe a closer examination would allow me to see the house from more than one new perspective. I followed our long driveway to the winding road that followed the curve of the inlet, which I figured would eventually lead me by the abandoned house. Not too far along, something struck the back of my head. I ducked and spun on my heels, almost collapsing on the gravel. A miniature pine cone rested near my feet. I assumed it fell from one of the overhanging trees and hit my unlucky head. But after a few steps, I was struck again. This time the projectile, another small pine cone, rolled to a stop in front of my feet. I spun around. The confused look on my face, very stupid, I'm sure, made my assailant laugh. Brett, the boy I met on the dock the previous day, stepped out from behind one of the thick trees in his front yard. He asked, "Where are you walking to?" I shook my head at him, then shrugged. I didn't want to tell him my intended destination at first, but then decided a companion might be nice. Brett seemed like the sort of high-spirited kid that would be good to have around if things got spooky. "I'm walking up to that abandoned house across the water," I admitted. "The one straight across from our house. I bet you can see it from your house, too." "Oh yeah, I can see it," Brett confirmed. "Dad complains about it all the time. Says he wishes they would just tear it down already." "Who should tear it down?" I asked. "Not sure. The neighborhood people, I guess." "So it is abandoned?" I asked. Brett shook his head. He picked up a long stick and prodded the gravel with it as he walked and talked. "There's this guy. I can't remember his name, but everybody calls that place the Krull House, so maybe that's his last name. It's kind of famous because the rest of the guy's family all died in there like 10 years ago." "Seriously?" I asked. "Yeah, my parents always try to hide stuff like that from me, but I always find out. I think his sister freaked out and killed her parents, then she killed herself or something like that. Anyway, still want to check it out?" "I don't know. Will the guy get mad if he sees us?" I asked. "So what if he does?" Brett replied. "I've never even seen him. He's always got all the curtains shut. I bet he won't even notice a couple kids like us." I said, "Okay, just a quick look." Brett said, "Cool, but we don't have to walk. I've got a few bikes you can pick one from." Brett led me around his house to a little overhang under which 6 bicycles rested against each other. He explained that people often left bikes behind at the rentals, and the management companies would just put them on the curb with the trash. Brett liked to fix them up and either keep them or sell them to a guy named Harry who ran a convenience store and owned a bike rental service. A red Huffy fit me perfectly. The front shocks had rusted stiff, but it would do fine for our short ride around the inlet. We pedaled up the road. Brett led me directly to the apparently infamous Krull house. Contrary to my earlier hopes, the face looked no better than the rear. Up close, the whole building appeared to lean back toward the water. The high peak of its triangular roof loomed above us as we stood in its shadow. A circular window near the top stared down at us like the eye of a giant cyclops. Perhaps I would have seen it as less threatening if Brett had not so casually mentioned the murders a few minutes before. My feelings from the previous night started pushing out the more positive ones I'd found that morning. "I dare you to sneak inside," Brett teased. I looked at him like he was crazy, and he laughed. He said, "Just imagine somewhere behind that door, a whole family died, one after the other. And now this place is just sitting here, exactly like it was that night, getting older and older, and rotting, and..." I noticed 2 fingers and 2 eyes peeking out from behind a curtain on the ground floor. "Brett," I whispered. He stopped looking at the house to look at me, just as the eyes and fingers disappeared. "What?" Brett asked. Still whispering, I said, "Let's get out of here. Somebody saw us." He struggled to turn his bike around. It kept trying to roll down the shoulder into the Krull's unkempt front yard. The front door latch clicked. I jumped onto my bike, ready to pedal away, and the chain popped right off of the gears. My pedals rotated freely. My leg dropped and I lost my balance, falling away from the bike as it crashed to the ground. Brett finally managed to turn his bike around, but stopped when he saw my predicament. "You all right?" a man's voice called from the house. My head heavy with dread, I looked up. A man with messy black hair and a baggy white t-shirt stood in the doorway of the Krull house. His small blue eyes were trained on me. They flicked down to my bike's floppy chain, then back to my face. I felt like a rodent backed into a corner by a feral cat. We're good," Brett answered for me. "Yeah, we're good," I echoed. The man stepped out of his house onto the front porch. He said, "You sure? Looks like your chain came off. I have some tools." He pointed into the house with his thumb. "That's okay, I don't need tools to fix it," Brett said, and I hoped he wasn't lying. The man replied, "Well, drag it into my yard at least. I don't want you getting run over. In fact, I'll come stand by you and make sure people see you." He stepped off of the porch. "No, really, it's okay," I tried to say, but the man was already walking toward us. I could tell he was abnormally thin beneath his baggy shirt and baggier sweatpants. His face looked like it had deflated around his skull, too. But his eyes looked healthy and sharp, and not one of his hairs had faded to gray. He didn't look older than maybe 35. He smiled at me as he arrived at the edge of his yard and picked up my bike. "I insist," he said as he dropped the kickstand and set the bike upright. Then he turned to Brett. "All yours." Brett got to work, leaving me and the man to just stand and watch. Feeling awkward, I asked, "So what's your name?" The man leaned away slightly and crossed his arms. He looked down at his feet and, drawing out the words as if second-guessing each letter, he said, "I'm Nico." "Nico Krull?" Brett asked. "Heh." Nico scratched the back of his head. then crossed his arms again. You guys are so young. Wow, and you still know about that? Not much about it really, I said, covering in case Nico was sensitive about his family's tragedy. Were you related to the family who got murdered? Asked Brett. So much for sensitivity. Yeah, said Nico. I'm their son. It was my parents and my sister who, died here. How's that chain looking? Brett replied, It's gonna be easy. I just gotta pull it over this gear and then… Oh, great. His tone dropped on the last word. What? I asked. Oh, one of the teeth is bent. I just need a couple big rocks. I helped him look, but he found both of the rocks he needed himself and started bending the problematic gear tooth back into place. I like the big windows on the back of your house. I bet it's nice in there, I said, just trying to be friendly as we stood and watched Brett work. So you must be in that big house across the inlet, huh? Nico asked rhetorically. That's a nice one. And yes, my house probably doesn't look like much on the outside. Who am I kidding? It looks terrible. But it's pretty nice inside. Would you like to come take a look while your friend takes care of this? He sounded unsure whether it was appropriate to invite me, and I'm guessing my face showed how inappropriate I found the suggestion. He unfolded his arms and held his hands up, palms open. Sorry, I know that's not the sort of thing a stranger should ask a kid. I promise I'm not… Well… It's okay, I said. Do you have any friends around here? I thought most people left during the off-season. I stay year-round, Nico replied. But no, to answer your question, it does get fairly lonely. I like to be here in the fall and winter, though. This is where my family stayed a lot of the time over the holidays and just to get away. Brett grunted and said, I can't get it. I knelt beside him. Let me try. Brett stood to let me work. He brushed his hands on his jeans and awkwardly glanced up at Nico, then back down at the bike. Nico laughed to himself. He said, You're local, aren't you? I think I've seen you riding around. Yeah, that's me, Brett replied coolly. Nico said, Man, I can't imagine all the stories you've heard about me and my house, right? What's the best one? Honestly, my parents don't talk about it, so mostly I just read a little bit about what happened online. Well, Nico trailed off, seeming to consider carefully before asking, Want to hear the real story while you wait? I'd rather you hear it from me than whatever gossip the locals spread around here. I looked up, not believing how casually Nico brought up his own family's murder. I guess Brett had said 10 years or more passed since it happened, but I still couldn't imagine talking about something so heinous the way Nico did, like it was a story about spring break. Yeah, I guess so, Brett answered. Nico did not wait for a response from me. Nico said, All right. Well, it happened almost 11 years ago now on Halloween night. You'd have to ask my sister if that was on purpose. It may have been a coincidence, but I'm personally not sure. My sister, Nina, had a serious interest in the occult. You guys know what that means? We both nodded. I don't think she was intentionally exploring anything evil, but something evil found her, whether she meant it to or not. That Halloween night, Nina slipped some pills into our parents' wine and knocked them out. Then she tied ropes around their necks and hung them. First Dad, then Mom. From the rear deck. He let this linger a moment. I had managed to straighten the gear tooth already, but said nothing to Brett yet because we were both entranced. I'm glad, that Nina drugged them, Nico continued. I like to think they were still unconscious when it happened. I hope they didn't even realize they were dying until they were gone. Nina, though, I don't know what she was feeling. I can't imagine the mental state of someone who could do that to her own parents. To top it off, she tied a third rope around her own neck and threw herself off after them. Brett noticed I'd fixed the tooth and we swapped places by the bike. Aren't you sad about it? And doesn't it freak you out to live here where something so scary happened? I asked. Yeah. What if what happened to your sister happens to you? Asked Brett. Oh, Nico laughed. No, I don't think that'll happen. The place just feels like any other house now. Not to be weird again, but you two are welcome to come check it out if you want. I can show you, where it all happened. He smiled a fox's smile at us. His eyes glinted blue. I was grateful to hear the pedals of my bike clunk as Brett finished setting the chain. We're good to go, he announced. Oh, come on, just a quick peek inside. Your parents are right across the inlet. They can see the house, Nico insisted. I felt trapped between fear and an ingrained prohibition against rudeness. I'd never been put in such a situation by an adult before. Ty, let's go, Brett urged. I watched Nico's expression darken. He said, So you'll sneak around and spy on my house? You'll listen to me talk about the greatest tragedy of my life like it's some campfire story, and then you're just gonna ride off? I mean, please, we're in broad daylight now. This was only partially true. Do you really think I'd try to hurt you? Ty, dude, let's... Shh. I shushed Brett because I thought I also heard someone call my name in the distance. Tyson! Tyson Worth! Yes, there it was again. It sounded like my mother yelling my name from the dock behind our house. How long had they been awake, wondering where I was? Not even Claire knew where I was going. Sorry, I really have to go, I told Nico. I nodded at Brett, who gave me a look that said, Finally! Nico stammered. Well, hold on. My rear deck is right across from your house, remember? Go out there and tell your mom you're okay. He smiled, that fox's smile. I looked at the sides of his yard, which were completely overgrown, providing no easy path back to the dock. I replied, No thanks, I'm just gonna hurry back. Oh, come on, do you hear how worried she sounds? Just let her know you're all right. What if we just went out on his dock for a second? I quietly asked Brett. He snarled back, Ty, I'm not going anywhere near his house. Let's go. Guys, it's straight through the house. I'll show... Before he finished, tires crunching gravel rushed toward us from around the bend. I recognized my family's car instantly. Dad had the window down. The second he saw me, he slammed on the brakes and leaned out. Tyson, you go straight back home right now, he barked. To Nico, he said, I'm sorry, sir. Were they bothering you? They didn't break something, did they? Not at all, sir, Nico replied, using a smoother voice than before. One of their bike chains fell off. I've been watching over them while they fixed it. Handy boys you've got. Oh, well, thanks for keeping an eye on them. Tyson, if you're not halfway home by the time I get this car turned around, I swear to God. And you... Dad trailed off when he looked at Brett. After a pause, he finished, You should probably get home too. I bet your parents are worried. My back tire spat rocks I pedaled so hard. Brett and I left Nico behind without another word to or from him. I made it halfway home before Dad caught up with us. He honked, prompting us to move to the side of the road. As he passed by, loud rock music blared from his windows. I told Brett I hoped the music would improve his mood. I would need any advantage I could take. I returned my bike to Brett's overhang and told him I would come see if he could hang out the next time I was free. At home, I had some explaining to do. I told my parents my original plan to walk to the house and straight back, but how Brett had attacked me and offered the bike, then how the chain fell off and... Dad interjected. When I found them, some random guy was helping them. See what I mean? Mom blurted. That guy could have been anybody. He could have seen a little boy with a broken bike and thought, boy, this'll be easy. How close she may have gotten to the actual truth made me pause for a second. I briefly considered telling her, then instantly realized giving credence to my parents' concerns could backfire over the coming days. I was with Brett. I wasn't alone, I defended. Dad said, look, the point is that we didn't know where you were. You could have told your sister or... I would have broken his neck if he woke me up to tell me something that stupid, Claire cut in. Dad ignored her. Mom said, all we're saying is let us know where you're going to be so then we can all go have fun and not have to worry, okay? Okay, I conceded. It wasn't too much to ask. We ate breakfast together, big fluffy pancakes my dad made to go with my mom's famous ham and cheese omelets. Despite the fragrant feast, I couldn't help but think of Nico sitting alone in the dark in his house across the water. Our existences seemed so completely opposite. I found myself looking at Claire, wondering if she could ever kill Mom and Dad. If that happened, would I end up like Nico, living alone in a crumbling house and talking to children for company? And, perhaps, trying to lure them in? No, I didn't think so. I hoped not anyway. Something about Nico spooked me, chilled my bones. Picturing his smile caused actual shivers to run down my spine. Something about him seemed almost robotic. He didn't seem stiff in the sense that he was uncomfortable around us, but like he was hurrying. He seemed like an actor rushing each line before he forgot the next. Why had he wanted to get us into his house so badly? I hated to dwell on this question, but I had to. I needed an answer, yet a large part of me hoped I would never get one. You've just listened to Chapter 2 of the Warning Woods 2024 Halloween special, The House Across the Water. A new chapter will be released each day until October 31st, Halloween. Subscribe to this channel or follow this podcast to be notified when each new chapter is released. If you're listening to this in the future, well then find Chapter 3. This is only the beginning. Evil is lurking in Lorna Shallows. Stay tuned.